The world refugee crisis is also an identity crisis. Today, in the wake of global migration, the number of refugees, displaced and stateless people is estimated to be nearing hundreds of millions. At the heart of this epidemic is lack of identity. Many of those forced to flee their homes from military upheavals and climate-induced cataclysms lack any form of identification. I know firsthand how crucial it is to have an ID in order to live a dignified life. I didn't have one growing up. My name is Mariana Dahan. Before I was the founder and CEO of the World Identity Network, I was a child in a tiny village in Moldova at the border with Ukraine. Since I was a little girl, I dreamed about going to Paris, the city of lights. But lack of ID papers was a huge obstacle standing in my way to achieving my dreams. Without a personal ID, everything was out of reach. I could not enroll in school or access social services in my own country, let alone travel abroad. Those without identity documents are denied social protection, education and healthcare. They cannot access financial services and credit, which severely limits job prospects and economic opportunities. 1 billion people around the world are in this situation. This number includes 600 million children aged 0 to 14, whose births have never been registered. I was blessed because my mother worked for years to obtain me an accurate birth certificate, which allowed me to become enrolled in school and start forging my own destiny. Without a personal ID document, a person can become invisible because they can't be accounted for by any authority. In this sense, we call undocumented minors invisible children, with only the most immediate family aware of their existence. This means they can easily fall prey to human traffickers who simply use fake ID documents to smuggle children across borders and later sell them to sex brothels, coerce them into modern slavery, or use them for organ trade. Human trafficking is a global issue, affecting millions of people around the world. And the stakes are high. It is a hugely profitable business that generates more than $150 billion annually. Lack of ID is at the core of human trafficking, and it affects minors and children in particular. In January 2020, the United States began implementing a pilot program which collects DNA information from migrants in state-run detention centers. This Department of Homeland Security policy authorizes Border Patrol agents to collect cheek swabs, samples from immigrants, including children and green card holders. The end result is a massive criminal database run by the FBI with the biometric information of every asylum seeker who has ever been in custody, regardless of whether or not they've committed a crime. Those who refuse to participate in the program are subject to prosecution by the US government. As a global community, we need to rethink and redefine the concept of identity with the best knowledge and solutions that technology can offer. When I see a young girl in a refugee camp having her biometrics taken, stored in a poorly protected central database, and used against her being able to get food and aid, I can't help but ask myself, is this safe? We need to recognize that technology is a double-edged sword and be mindful of the risks that it may pose in highly complex environments. We need to quickly learn from our experience and be on the lookout for new approaches that can help address these risks. The privacy and security breaches that happen in the Equifax and Facebook teach us one thing, that we as individuals need to have more control about our personal identifiable data, more control over our identities. Self-sovereign identity represents a revolutionary step forward. We can no longer ignore the threats posed by current identification methods, like the one being utilized by the Department of Homeland Security. While they aim at giving every child a personal and unique ID, these outdated identification models also put vulnerable people at risk of future human rights violations. Self-sovereign identity uses zero-knowledge proofs, cryptographically securing everyone's data. No personal identifiable data stored on databases. Individuals can prove that they are who they claim they are without revealing their personal identifiable data. Over the next few years, this technology will continue to get more advanced and serve as the foundational blocks for entire industries and governments. But it must be developed to empower individuals while putting them in charge of their own destinies. Integrating universal human rights into these models will help reduce human rights violations, from child trafficking to statelessness, while also deterring misuse from authoritarian regimes. Not only does identity need to be a human right, it needs to be built off a self-sovereign model.